page 22, and it says, use a protractor to draw a pair of supplementary angles that share a side. What is the measure of each angle? So before we draw it, we know that supplementary angles are the two angles that added together to get 180 degrees. Okay, supplementary angles are two angles added together to get 180 degrees. Complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. So just remember, C for complementary is 90 degrees. Supplementary for S, it's 180 degrees. So two angles added together to become 90 is complementary. Two angles added together to get 180 is supplementary. Okay, so since it's these supplementary angles, we know that the two angles should add up to 180. So 180, we have to know that that's a straight line. So we draw a straight line, and I just randomly divided that into two different angles, okay? And then using a protractor, you're just going to set the point in the middle like this to measure the wider angle here, which is, it's about 160, right? 160 here. And also this small angle right here, you look at the bottom one, which is 20. So it's going to be 160, and right here is 120. If I can get that right, yeah, it's 120. It's 20. So it's 160 plus 20 is 180, and that make up a supplementary angles. So let's move on to number 2. Use a protractor to draw a pair of supplementary angles that do not share a side. So they should look like this, because for the first one, number 1 was they're sharing a side. So they're sharing this side, right? So when they're added together, it becomes 180. Same thing for this. The same thing, I just drew the same angles, but this time that do not share a side, so I just drew them separately. Okay, so this is 160, this is 20. Now, number 3 says calculate the measure of an angle that is supplementary to angle KJL. So if it's angle KJL, this J in the middle, the one that's in the middle is the angle formed by the rays right here. So it's KJL. So this is the angle, and we have to figure out one of the other angle that makes them supplementary angles. So supplementary, by definition, it's two angles added together to become 180. So we must subtract the angle 122 from 180. So it's actually 180 minus 22, and you get 158. So this angle right here is 158. That's what makes this angle plus this angle equal to supplementary angles. Alright, so moving on to the next page. Page 23. Use a protractor to draw a pair of complementary angles. We know that complementary angles are the angles that add up to 90 degrees. Okay, so if it's a 90 degrees, we know that it's a right angle. And so if we draw that, I just drew a 90 degree angle, and since it's a complementary angles, I just divided and used a protractor to measure each of the angles. Okay, so 70 plus 20, they do add up to 90, which makes them a complementary angles. And number 5 is the same thing. Use a protractor to draw a pair of complementary angles that do not share a side. So this one shared a side, this one they have in common, but you just have to draw it separately this time. So 70 right here, 20 right here. They still add up to 90, which makes them complementary angles. Number 6, calculate the measure of an angle that is complementary to angle J. So we know that angle J is 60, and complementary is 90, right? So 90 minus 60 is 30. So this right here is 30. Number 7, given each statement, write and solve each equation to determine the measure of each angle in the angle pair. So two angles are both Congruent and supplementary. Congruent means they're the same. So we gotta have the two angles, so we are not given a number for the angle measurements, right? So we're just gonna call it x. Okay, so x plus x is equal to 180. How I got 180 is from this. Supplementary tells us that two angles added together should be 180, and the two angles they said it's congruent, meaning they're the same. So I'm gonna have x plus x is equal to 180. Okay, so we're supposed to figure out what x equals to. So I'm just going to solve it by 2. There are two x's, so I combine them. So 1x plus 1x is 2x. 2 times x is equal to 180. To get x by itself, or to isolate the x, you just have to divide by 2, because inverse operation of multiplying is dividing. So you divide by 2 both sides, and you get x is equal to 90. Okay? So that means each angle must be 90 degrees to get 180, because they are both congruent. Letter B, it says two angles are both congruent still, but they're complementary. So this time it's going to be the same, x plus x, but now it's going to be equal to 90 degrees instead of 180, because it's complementary. So you solve it the same way. 2x is equal to 90. Divide by 2 both sides, and x is equal to 45. Okay. And letter C, the supplement of an angle is half the measure of the angle itself. So we know that it's supplement, so we know that it should be equal to 180. And says of an angle, so we know that there's an x somewhere, and is half the measure of the angle itself. So we know that angle, so x plus a half of x should equal to 180. So this 0.5 times x means it's a half of an angle, x. So same thing, you combine them, 1x plus 0.5x is equal to 1.5x. You divide by 1.5 on both sides, and you get x is equal to 120.